I had fallen into a deep sleep. I was dreaming about something totally random when I was disturbed from my sleep by a series of knocks on my bedroom door. Still kind of in a daze, I didn't really know what was going on. Then, again, 3 knocks on the door. By this point, I was getting really scared and pulled my covers up over my head. Watch this video until the end to find out what happened next that was so terrifying to cause this boy and his family to move out of their home. I'm your host, Severed Soul. I want to say this all started at the beginning of this year, so let's get right into it. I'm going to give a backstory of the house I live in for a bit of context. I live in a very spacious home in Connecticut with my boyfriend and his family. The house was built in 2000 and I've lived here for 3 years. My boyfriend and I live in the basement, which is fully finished. It's basically our own apartment. One of the very first things that appeared weird to me about this property is that when you search for it on Google Maps, it comes up as a church cemetery. When you Google that cemetery though, it's set about a mile down the road on the other end. A weird little coincidence, I think. Anyway, I started noticing out of the corner of my eye a greyish-white shadow moving in the kitchen at night. Initially, I chalked it up to me seeing things, because that night I had had a drink, so I just let it go. Well, eventually I started seeing this figure multiple times per week, even when I hadn't had a drink. At this point, I started finding it pretty creepy. The figure was tall and slim, but I couldn't really see any distinguishing facial features. It was more of a side profile, a quick glance, then it would disappear. Fast forward to the 6th of March this year, when I noticed a Facebook post by my partner's mother. She and I both work in hospitals, and she asked if anybody else in healthcare had ever bought a spirit home. She went on to say that she often felt like she was being watched while she was at home. So I sent her a message explaining to her about the figure that I'd been seeing in the basement. After I told her this, I believe she burned sage all around the house, and things seemed to die down for a while. Honestly, everything was really good for about a month. I wasn't seeing the shadow anymore, and she no longer had that feeling of being watched. Then, on April 24th, my boyfriend's mother posted on Facebook again, saying that she needed a house cleansing immediately. He said things had been good for a while, but that the activity had started again and escalated. She'd started hearing knocking on the walls and doors, and the dogs had started barking at all hours through the night. Well, that night I woke up at some point during the night because I really needed to pee. I swung my legs over, and the second my feet touched the floor, the printer in the corner of the room by the kitchen switched itself on. The light from the printer illuminated every inch of the basement. Then, it started to print something. When I checked the tray to look at the printed piece of paper, a chill ran down my spine. On that piece of paper was a human handprint. It was faint, but it was definitely there. It creeped the hell out of me, so I unplugged the printer, climbed back into bed, and tried to get some sleep. Around a week later, I was in bed again, and my boyfriend was fast asleep. Since the incident with the printer, I was really having trouble sleeping, so I was barely asleep. All of a sudden, I was jolted awake and alerted to the feeling of something really heavy hitting the side of the bed. I sat up and looked all around the room, at which point I could feel cold breath on my face and something was moving my hair. This absolutely scared the shit out of me. All I could do was pull the covers up to my head and once again try my best to get some sleep. On May 10th, she posted again on Facebook to say that she'd seen a greyish-black mass floating around the house. That specific night, me and my boyfriend were in Maine for the weekend, and we came home the following day. I hadn't seen this Facebook post until 2 days later, on the 12th of May, which was Mother's Day. This day just happened to be the 1-year anniversary of having my baby removed due to a 3rd trimester miscarriage. However, I was enjoying the day with my boyfriend's family and went inside to get some food. As I was standing at the island in the middle of the kitchen, I could see something moving. It was a black, floating shadow, and it was low to the ground. It wasn't tall whatsoever. I watched in absolute shock as it floated down the hallway towards the door to our basement. Well, I asked my mother-in-law about her experience with the shadow and where she'd seen it. She'd seen it in exactly the same place that I saw it. As we stood there talking about it, the smoke alarms randomly started going off. I want to say at this point, my boyfriend's mother, his sister, and myself had all experienced things in that house over the past few months. My boyfriend and his father, however, hadn't seen or heard anything. I'm now absolutely terrified to be in the house alone. I just get this really awful, oppressive feeling. A woman at work is a paranormal investigator in her spare time, and I was explaining my situation to her. She interrupted me abruptly and asked me if I burn candles in my home. I responded yes, occasionally, but not recently. She said, "I have something telling me, go ahead, light that candle." But then she said, "For God's sake, whatever you do, please do not light any candles." We also just found out that the original house on that property was destroyed in a fire, and this house was built in its place. The original detached garage is still there though. I am beyond freaked out, and am seriously considering moving out altogether. What are your thoughts? When I was younger, my father lived just across from a graveyard, which, at the time, I thought was the coolest thing in the world. From a very young age, I had always been fascinated with the paranormal. However, there was a particular incident that occurred in that house that absolutely chilled me to my core. There was a very large field of weeds and dry grass that went up to our knees, in between the road that we live on and the graveyard. This kind of added to the already eerie atmosphere. The second we arrived at my dad's house, I was upset to learn that me and my little sister had to sleep in the basement alone. There were 13 red steps leading down into the basement, which I found really creepy, but my dad just laughed at my concern. At this age, I didn't really know all that much about the paranormal and links between evil and certain numbers, but I had a really negative feeling about those stairs. We listened intently to what sounded like a woman's faint voice trying to lure us out into the darkness. I felt a really strong urge to follow the voice, but something felt off about the situation and instinct kicked in, so I made sure that I stayed with my sister to keep her safe. This must have made the woman really mad, because on the second or third night, activity in that basement really seemed to escalate. We started hearing someone walking up and down the stairs repeatedly, and sometimes it sounded like they were walking on all fours. We always heard the voice whispering, but we tried our best to ignore it. It was so quiet, but we could both definitely hear it, and up until this point, it didn't really seem to pose us any real threat. However, that night something happened that changed my life and how I perceived the paranormal forever. The activity down in the basement really seemed to have gone up a level. That voice now sounded angry. Yeah, felt and sounded like what I can only describe as static. And there was more movement coming out of the darkness than usual. We heard her run down the stairs. This absolutely terrified the both of us, and my little sister whimpered and climbed onto my mattress next to me. I grabbed her as tightly as I could, and we both scooted backwards against the wall. My sister hid her head under the blanket, and I really wish that I'd done the same. I stared into the darkness in anticipation of what was about to come. And in that moment, she finally manifested and presented herself physically for the very first time. In the top left corner of the doorway, she finally emerged, poking her head into the room. But something was very, very wrong. I tried my best not to scream for my sister's sake, and to be honest, I was just frozen in fear. I tried my best not to make eye contact, and after what seemed like an eternity, it quickly pulled its head back into the darkness behind the wall. I grabbed my sister and dragged her into the small bathroom connected to our bedroom. Whenever I explained to people what happened, I was never totally honest about the most significant detail about the events that transpired that night. I always said it was a girl with long black hair and a pale face, which wasn't too far from the truth. However, my whole life I've tried convincing myself that that was the real story, because the truth of it was way too terrifying even for me to believe. The girl did have long black hair, and she did have a pale face. But what terrified me is that it was my hair and my face. It looked exactly like me, but pale, malnourished, and, well, dead. I had always been praised and complimented for my very long hair, but after this happened, I cut it to my shoulders. I could no longer face seeing her every time I looked in the mirror. Recently, I asked my sister what she remembers about that house and that night in particular. Thankfully, she has no memory of it ever happening. I think it may have been too traumatizing for her to remember. She was 3 years younger than me, so maybe she was just too young. I definitely won't be stirring those memories up for her, because, to be honest, I wish I could forget them too. So, back in 2014, my family and I, me, my mum, my stepdad, and my 2 brothers, all moved into a big old house as a blended family. It really was the perfect horror movie house. It was situated at the edge of town, opposite a cemetery. It was between 200 and 300 years old, and it backed onto an abandoned hospital building. Anyway, we lived there for about 4 years until we moved into our current house, which is only a 2-minute walk down the road. But ever since we lived there, I can't stop thinking about all the weird, strange, scary shit that occurred. I've even gone as far as contacting local archives, etc., to find out more information on the history of the property. It was absolutely horrendous, and I still have to drive past that house every day. I'll try to describe in as much detail as I possibly can some of the instances that occurred in that house. So, on our very first day and night in that house, our garden, as I said, backed onto an old, ruined, abandoned hospital with large grounds, etc. Only our garden fence separated this from us. The first afternoon/evening that we lived in that house, my brothers and I created a makeshift football goal out of logs leaning up against the tree at the bottom of our garden. We played around for a while, but when we got bored, we decided to go exploring in the hospital grounds. We were gone for less than an hour, but when we came back and walked past our goalposts, somebody had gathered all the sticks and logs and arranged them in these super neat piles. It sounds really stupid, but there's no way they could have just fallen that way. Me and my brothers were so freaked out that our parents eventually told us that it was them that did it, even though this wasn't the truth, and eventually they admitted to us that they were freaked out too. One day, they were getting really pissed off with me and my brothers. They said, "For God's sake, stop watering that plant. It really doesn't need that much water, you're going to kill it." My brothers and I were fairly young at this stage, and to be quite honest, we didn't even know which plant they were talking about. A few days passed, and our parents were really pissed. They told us the plant was dying and we really needed to stop it. It even went as far as them moving and hiding the plant in different locations. But nothing worked, and eventually the plant died. At this day, my brothers still swear to God that it wasn't them, and I believe them. So, for the next incident, my mum was standing in the doorway to my bedroom talking to me. She saw my younger brother walk out of his doorway to his bedroom down the hallway towards the bathroom. This might sound pretty normal, and initially she thought nothing of it. However, when she walked downstairs just a few seconds later, she was absolutely horrified to notice that both of my brothers were sitting on the sofa with my stepdad watching football on the TV. My mum doesn't believe in the paranormal at all, but she was super freaked out by this. This was followed by general, constant activity all around the house. We had 2 dogs that were extremely well behaved, but they started acting really weird in a specific area in the garden. They'd snarl and growl at first, but then they'd lie down and whine and cry, as if somebody was shouting at them. This started happening every damn night. I had a wooden sign hanging on some string on the back of my bedroom door. Every night, just after midnight, the sign would start banging on the door as if somebody was knocking. We had no windows at all in the upstairs hallway, so there's no way that this could have been caused by a draft. Eventually, my dad removed the string and screwed the sign to the door. This seemed to work at first. Well, for a few nights at least. There was no knocking, no waking up in the middle of the night. It was bliss. Until it wasn't. One night, I had fallen into a deep sleep. I was dreaming about something totally random when I was disturbed from my sleep by a series of knocks on my bedroom door. I woke up, still kind of in a daze, wondering what was going on. Then, again, 3 knocks on the bedroom door. By this point, I was getting really scared and pulled my covers up over my head. However, after a few seconds, there was 3 huge slams on the bedroom door, as if somebody was trying to cave the door in with a sledgehammer. It was absolutely terrifying, and so loud in fact that it woke up my whole family. My parents came rushing into my room to see what all the commotion was, but they could clearly see that me and both my brothers were still in bed. We were all really shaken up by this incident, and didn't really know what to do. In the end, my parents placed the house up for sale. We moved out, and moved into our current home. Thankfully, we've had no such experiences since moving here. Have you ever had to move home due to paranormal activity? That wraps things up for today. I really hope those stories give you nightmares. As always, leave your thoughts in the comments section down below. Please don't forget to like this video and subscribe to the channel for a feast of grim and grisly content. Thanks for watching. I'm your host, Severed Soul.